"You're just a janitor." With those 4 words, an arrogant, power-drunk CEO tried to erase a man's existence. Little did he know, he was mocking the one person on the planet who could save his billion-dollar empire. This isn't just another revenge story, it's living proof that a person's true worth is never, ever found in their job title. A single line of code is about to expose a shocking truth. Have you ever felt completely invisible? Judged by the cover before you even had a chance to show what's inside? We've all felt that sting of injustice. It's that soul-crushing moment when the world seems to value appearances more than the person underneath. This story is a tribute to everyone who has ever been underestimated, to every undercover genius and hidden talent the world has yet to see. Get ready to meet Edward Greene, a legendary programmer living with a secret identity, forced to hide in plain sight as a simple janitor after a devastating betrayal. And amidst a sea of indifferent executives, there's Carolyn Graham, the one manager who sees the intelligence behind his eyes. What starts as a simple act of kindness blossoms into a forbidden office romance. A love story that becomes the last beacon of hope in the middle of corporate drama. But what happens when a catastrophic digital disaster brings the company to its knees? When the world's top engineers fail and panic sets in, Edward's secret becomes a ticking time bomb. Will he use his hidden talent for saving the company that humiliated and mocked him? Or will he watch it all burn as his sweet revenge? Loyalty will be tested, careers will be annihilated, and a shocking plot twist promises an emotional, life-changing outcome. If you believe a person's dignity is worth more than any fortune, then you've found your community. Comment below with one word that describes the CEO's attitude. Like this video as a sign of respect for Edward's struggle, and subscribe so you don't miss the exact moment his redemption becomes his boss's ultimate humiliation. Stick with us to the very end and witness the surprise that nobody saw coming. "You're just a janitor," the arrogant CEO mocked, his voice echoing in the ridiculously large office, a sterile monument to his own ego. He gestured dismissively at a small smudge on the marble floor, completely unaware of the universe of intellect hidden behind the janitor's calm expression. To him, Edward Greene was nothing more than part of the background, a ghost in a blue uniform, utterly insignificant. This single moment of casual cruelty was a symptom of a much deeper rot within the company's leadership. The words were designed to sting, to remind Edward of his supposed place in the world. The CEO, a man named Alistair Vance, thrived on such petty displays of power, using them to inflate his own fragile sense of importance. He saw the mop, the bucket, the uniform, and his judgment stopped there, blinded by prejudice. He couldn't possibly imagine that the man he had just humiliated possessed the one line of code, the single elegant thought that could save his entire empire. Edward simply nodded, his face a perfect mask of neutrality. Inside, however, a storm of memories and calculations churned. He had been a king in the world of code once, celebrated for his genius, before a bitter betrayal had sent him into this self-imposed exile. This daily dose of disrespect was the price he paid for his anonymity, a constant, grating reminder of all he had lost. This drama was a quiet, personal one, played out in silent hallways. This scene was the epitome of a corporate culture gone wrong, where a person's true worth was measured only by their title on a business card. The powerful CEO couldn't see the undercover genius standing before him. He only saw a task, a function, a nobody. This blindness, this utter lack of perception, was the company's greatest vulnerability, a catastrophic flaw that was about to be brutally exposed for all to see. Alistair turned back to his panoramic window, already forgetting the janitor's existence. He was consumed by the impending launch, a billion-dollar software suite that was his legacy. Yet, a tiny, almost imperceptible bug in its core programming was causing his top engineers sleepless nights. He was a king presiding over a fragile glass castle, completely oblivious to the fact that the locksmith was standing right behind him, holding the only key. The irony was so thick, it was almost suffocating. The man tasked with cleaning up physical messes was the only one capable of cleaning up the digital catastrophe that was brewing deep within the company's servers. Edward Greene's secret identity remained perfectly intact, shielded by a society that judges books by their worn-out covers. The CEO's mockery wasn't just an insult, it was a prophecy of his own downfall. This interaction set the stage for a life-changing series of events. It was a classic tale of pride before the fall, but with a plot twist no one could have predicted. The fate of a corporate giant didn't rest in the polished boardroom, but in the hands of the man who cleaned it late at night. The question is, after being mocked so cruelly, would he even want to help? Edward Greene, a name that once echoed with reverence in the elite circles of Silicon Valley, now belonged to a ghost. He was a brilliant programmer, a true architect of the digital age, forced into hiding by a past betrayal so deep it shattered his faith in the world he helped build. A former partner had stolen his work, claimed his glory, and left him for dead, professionally speaking. So he vanished, choosing obscurity over a fight he no longer had the heart for. Now his genius was his most guarded secret. He quietly mops the floors of Omnicorp, a tech giant whose foundational code he could rewrite in his sleep. His hidden talent is completely invisible to the powerful, self-important executives who walk by him every single day without a second glance. They see a janitor, a man who exists to be overlooked, and that's exactly the way Edward needs it to be for now. His anonymity is his only shield. Each stroke of the mop is a meditative act, a way to quiet a mind that still sparks with complex algorithms and elegant solutions. He overhears snippets of conversations about coding problems that are, to him, child's play. He sees flaws in their security protocols that are wide enough to drive a truck through. But he says nothing. To reveal his secret identity would be to invite the dangers of his past back into his quiet, unassuming present. He finds a strange sort of peace in this simple physical work. It's honest. It's real. There's no backstabbing, no corporate espionage, just a floor that needs to be cleaned. This humble existence is a far cry from the life he once led, but in many ways, it's more genuine. He is no longer chasing fame or fortune, he is simply trying to survive, to piece his life back together in the shadows, one clean floor at a time. This self-imposed penance has made him an astute observer of people. He sees the corporate drama unfold from a unique vantage point: ambition, the fear, the petty rivalries. He sees the arrogant CEO, Alistair Vance, strut through the halls, and he sees the kindness in some of the junior employees. He is a silent witness to the true nature of the company, far more than any executive could ever be. But a genius cannot remain dormant forever. A mind like Edward's is a force of nature, and it craves a problem to solve. He feels the itch in his fingers, the familiar pull of the keyboard, the desire to create and to fix. This quiet life as a janitor is a cage, and sooner or later, the undercover genius within him will have to break free, especially when he sees the company he works for hurtling towards a cliff. He carries the weight of his past like a physical burden, but also the power of his knowledge like a hidden weapon. The betrayal taught him a harsh lesson about trust, but it didn't destroy the core of who he is. Deep down, Edward Greene is still a builder. And as he watches the company from the sidelines, he knows that a storm is coming, and he might be the only one with an umbrella. In the cold, impersonal world of Omnicorp, Carolyn Graham was an anomaly. As a compassionate senior manager, she operated on a different frequency, one that valued human connection over corporate posturing. She was the only person who saw beyond Edward's uniform, not because she suspected his secret, but because it was in her nature to see the person first. She noticed the intelligence in his eyes, a depth that didn't match his menial position. Their interactions were small but meaningful moments in a day filled with sterile meetings and empty corporate jargon. She'd often engage him in small talk by the coffee machine, asking about his day with genuine interest. He, in turn, found himself slowly letting his guard down around her. This budding connection was the beginning of an unlikely office romance, a quiet love story unfolding in the most unexpected of places. Her kindness was a lifeline in his world of isolation. Carolyn saw flickers of his hidden talent not in code, but in conversation. He'd make a wry, incredibly intelligent observation about a systemic problem, couched in simple language, or solve the daily crossword puzzle in the break room with breathtaking speed. These were tiny clues, breadcrumbs leading to a truth she couldn't yet comprehend. She just knew that the quiet janitor she had befriended was far more than he seemed. For Edward, Carolyn was a dangerous temptation. She represented a world he had abandoned, a world of trust and emotional connection. Each kind word from her was a crack in the fortress he had built around himself. He was drawn to her warmth and integrity, a stark contrast to the greed and arrogance of the CEO he served. This gentle, unfolding romance was both a comfort and a terrifying risk to his carefully constructed secret identity. She didn't pry or ask invasive questions, she simply treated him with a level of respect no one else did. One afternoon, she saw him reading a book on quantum physics and simply smiled, saying, "Looks like light reading." It was a shared moment of understanding that went beyond words. What do you think is the most powerful, yet simple, act of kindness? For Edward, it was being seen as an equal, just for a moment. This unique bond set them apart from everyone else at the company. It was a silent alliance, a friendship that defied the rigid corporate hierarchy. Carolyn didn't know she was befriending an undercover genius, and Edward didn't know he was finding his one true ally in the battle to come. Their connection was organic, a testament to the idea that a person's true worth has nothing to do with their station. As the days turned into weeks, their small talks grew longer, their smiles more frequent. A beautiful, fragile trust was being built between the compassionate manager and the brilliant programmer in disguise. This foundation would soon be tested by a crisis that would threaten to tear not just the company, but both of their lives apart. Their love story was about to collide with a corporate nightmare. Suddenly, the low hum of corporate efficiency at Omnicorp was replaced by a rising tide of panic. A catastrophic bug appeared, as if from nowhere, in the company's flagship software, Nexus. This wasn't just a minor glitch, it was a deep, venomous flaw that was corrupting data, crashing systems, and threatening to derail the entire billion-dollar launch scheduled for the end of the month. The company's future was suddenly on the line. The bug was a ghost in the machine, an elusive predator that baffled the top engineering teams. These were supposedly the best minds in the industry, poached from rivals with obscene salaries and promises of glory. Yet they were utterly powerless. They threw everything they had at the problem, all at coding sessions. Endless diagnostics, caffeine-fueled brainstorming. The bug remained, clever and destructive, mocking their efforts at every turn. The pressure from the top was immense. The CEO, Alistair Vance, was a man unaccustomed to failure, and his fury echoed through the hallways. He demanded solutions, not excuses, his face growing darker with every failed attempt. The drama in the executive wing was palpable. Careers were hanging by a thread. The company that prided itself on digital perfection was now facing a public and humiliating technological collapse. This crisis was the ultimate test of the company's foundation. It revealed that for all its talk of innovation and genius, it had become a hollow shell, a place where arrogance overshadowed true talent. The so-called experts were stumped, their expensive degrees and impressive resumes rendered useless against a problem that required not just knowledge, but a deeper, more intuitive understanding of code architecture and understanding that was currently cleaning their floors. Edward, of course, was aware of the chaos. He overheard the panicked whispers, the hushed, desperate phone calls from engineers on the verge of breaking down. He saw the mounting anxiety on their faces as he emptied their trash cans late at night. From the fragments of their conversations, he began to piece together the nature of the bug, and in his mind, a quiet, elegant solution began to take shape. He was faced with a profound dilemma. Revealing his knowledge would mean exposing his secret identity and risking everything. But staying silent would mean watching the company crumble, taking the jobs of hundreds of innocent people with it, including the one person who had shown him kindness, Carolyn Graham. The fate of Omnicorp was resting on a choice he never wanted to make. Saving the company was now a personal, emotional struggle. The clock was ticking, each second bringing Omnicorp closer to ruin. The engineers were beaten, the CEO was enraged, and all hope seemed to be draining away. The stage was set for an intervention from the most unlikely of saviors. The company didn't need another overpaid executive, it needed a hero. And that hero was currently polishing the doorknob to the very server room that held the key to the crisis. The frantic energy of the day bled into the eerie silence of the night at Omnicorp's headquarters. The engineers had finally gone home, defeated and demoralized, leaving behind a battlefield of whiteboards covered in failed theories and half-empty coffee cups. But one person remained, moving silently through the deserted halls. It was Edward Greene, his janitor cart gliding noiselessly over the polished floors, his mind racing with the solution they couldn't find. He could no longer stand by and do nothing. It wasn't about loyalty to the CEO who mocked him, but about the integrity of the code itself. It pained him to see such a beautiful system being corrupted by a flaw he could fix. Late that night, driven by an instinct he couldn't suppress, he secretly accessed an unlocked terminal in an empty office, the glow of the screen illuminating a face that was for the first time in years fully alive. With fingers that moved like a concert pianist's, flying across the keyboard with a speed and grace that defied his janitorial disguise, he didn't fix the bug. That would be too obvious, too easy to trace. Instead, he wrote an anonymous and possibly elegant piece of code, a short, cryptic subroutine. It wasn't the answer, but it was a clue, a single, brilliant breadcrumb that would point a competent programmer in the exact right direction. He posted the code to an internal engineering forum under the username Janus, the Roman god of beginnings and endings, and then vanished back into the shadows. It was a massive risk. If discovered, he would be fired, possibly even accused of corporate espionage. But the undercover genius within him, the part of him that revered logic and order, had to act. He had offered a lifeline, a whisper of a solution from the void. The next morning, the code snippet was discovered. It caused an immediate stir among the beleaguered engineering team. Most dismissed it as nonsense, a prank from a low-level coder. But a few of the more talented engineers saw it for what it was: a piece of programming so sophisticated, so insightful, it was like finding a Shakespearean sonnet scrawled on a bathroom wall. It was a work of art that hinted at a much larger masterpiece. This single act of anonymous help was a turning point in the unfolding drama. It was a quiet rebellion against the arrogance of the company's leadership and a testament to Edward's character. He chose to help not for glory or redemption, but because it was the right thing to do. He had planted a seed of hope, a surprise clue that could lead to saving the company, all without revealing his secret identity. Now the clue was out there, a puzzle waiting to be solved. Would the engineers be humble enough to follow the lead of an anonymous stranger? Or would their pride and the company's rigid hierarchy cause them to overlook the key to their salvation? Edward could only watch and wait from the sidelines, his fate and the company's hanging on their next move. He had opened a door, now someone had to walk through it. While the lead engineers debated the mysterious code from Janus, one person was looking at the problem from a different angle. Carolyn Graham, using her managerial access, was reviewing system logs, trying to trace the origin of the helpful snippet. She wasn't a coder, but she had a keen eye for patterns and anomalies. She discovered the anonymous fix and was immediately intrigued by its elegance and the sheer audacity of its delivery. The code was a ghost with no traceable origin. But the timing of its appearance, late at night when the building was deserted, sparked a thought in her mind. Who was always there, moving through the halls when no one else was? Her mind immediately jumped to one person, the quiet janitor she had befriended. It seemed like a crazy leap of logic, a wild and unsubstantiated guess, but the pieces started to fit together in a shocking way. She began to suspect the quiet janitor, Edward Greene, might be more than he seems. She recalled their conversation's intelligent remarks, his lightning-fast crossword skills, the physics book. It wasn't just one thing, but a collection of small details that painted a picture of a brilliant mind in hiding. Could the man who mopped the floors also be the undercover genius who could save the company? The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. This suspicion began to consume her. She started observing Edward more closely, but discreetly. She saw the way his eyes would scan a complex diagram on a whiteboard as he passed, the subtle tensing of his hands as he overheard engineers discussing the bug. The secret identity he had so carefully constructed was beginning to show cracks, at least to the one person who was actually paying attention. Her burgeoning love story was now entangled in a corporate mystery. Carolyn found herself in a difficult position. If she was right, then the key to saving the company was right there, disguised in a janitor's uniform. But how could she possibly act on such a wild theory? Accusing the humble janitor of being a secret supercoder would sound insane. She could be mocked, even fired, for such an outrageous claim. She had no proof, only a strong gut-level intuition. This revelation was a plot twist in her own life. She had always prided herself on being a good judge of character, but this was on another level. The emotional connection she felt with Edward was now layered with a sense of awe and mystery. The office romance had suddenly turned into a high-stakes thriller. Was she falling for a man who was living a complete lie, or a hero in the most unexpected disguise? She decided to keep her suspicions to herself for now, waiting for more concrete evidence. But a seed had been planted. Carolyn Graham was no longer just the compassionate manager, she was an investigator, the only one who suspected the true worth of the silent man in the hallways. Her faith in him was about to be put to the ultimate test in a very public and humiliating way. The tension at Omnicorp had reached a breaking point. Alistair Vance, the CEO, called a tense emergency board meeting to address the ongoing crisis with the Nexus software. The air in the room was thick with fear and unspoken accusations. He needed a scapegoat, a target for the immense pressure he was feeling from the board and investors. And as fate would have it, a perfect target was about to present itself. Just as the meeting was about to begin, Edward was finishing his rounds, tasked with ensuring the executive floor was spotless. As he carefully backed out of the boardroom, his cart jostled, and a small amount of water sloshed from his bucket onto the pristine carpet. It was a minor spill, something that could be cleaned in seconds, but for the enraged CEO, it was the final straw. He saw an opportunity to unleash his fury. In front of Carolyn and the entire executive team, the CEO publicly belittled Edward for the minor spill. "Is this the level of competence we have at this company?" Alistair boomed, his voice dripping with scorn. "Even the janitor can't do his job right." He used Edward as a cruel example of the incompetence he believed was plaguing his company, a public whipping boy for his own failures. It was a raw, humiliating display of power. Edward stood there, frozen, the focus of every eye in the room. He was being mocked and degraded by the most powerful man in the company for a simple accident. His face remained a stoic mask, but inside, the old wounds of betrayal and disrespect were torn open anew. He felt the familiar, bitter taste of being seen as less than human, as nothing more than a function, an object of contempt. This public drama was a brutal reminder of why he hid his secret identity. The other executives shuffled uncomfortably, their eyes darting away, none willing to challenge their volatile boss. They were cowards, complicit in their silence. But one person wasn't silent. Carolyn Graham, watching this unfold, felt a surge of protective anger. She saw not just a janitor being humiliated, but the kind, intelligent man she had grown to care for being torn down for no reason. What would you do in that situation? Stay silent to protect your career, or speak up for what's right? This was the moral dilemma Carolyn faced in that split second. The choice she was about to make would be a life-changing one, a moment that would define her character and set her on a collision course with the most powerful man at the company. Her decision would have consequences she couldn't yet imagine. For Edward, this public shaming was a harsh test. It pushed him closer to the edge, closer to embracing a desire for revenge rather than redemption. The CEO had no idea that in his attempt to assert dominance, he had just alienated the one person who held the key to saving the company. The atmosphere in the room was electric, waiting for someone to break the silence. The silence in the boardroom was deafening, broken only by the CEO's heavy breathing. Just as Alistair Vance was about to continue his tirade, a clear voice cut through the tension. "That's enough," Carolyn Graham said, standing up from her seat at the table. All heads snapped in her direction, a collective gasp rippling through the room. No one ever stood up to the CEO. It was career suicide. With unwavering eye contact, Carolyn stood up to the CEO to defend Edward's dignity. "He had a minor accident," she stated, her voice calm but firm. "It has absolutely no bearing on the crisis we are facing. Your attempt to publicly humiliate an employee is unprofessional and, frankly, unacceptable." She spoke not as a subordinate, but as a leader, her words creating a stark rift between her and her powerful, vindictive boss. Alistair was stunned into silence, his face turning a shade of purple. He was being challenged, defied, in front of his entire team. But more than that, he was being defied over a janitor. The act was so unexpected, so contrary to the company's culture of fear, that he was momentarily speechless. Carolyn hadn't just spoken up, she had thrown down a gauntlet, choosing human decency over corporate politics. Hit like on this video as a sign of respect for Carolyn's incredible courage. This brave act solidified a deep, unspoken connection with Edward. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and for the first time in years, he felt seen. She wasn't just defending an employee, she was defending him. In that moment, the slow-burning embers of their office romance roared into a flame. She had risked everything for his dignity, proving that her kindness wasn't just superficial. It was the core of who she was. This was a life-changing moment for their love story. The consequences were immediate. The CEO, his authority challenged, shot her a look of pure venom. "We will discuss your future at this company later, Ms. Graham," he snarled, before dismissing Edward with a wave of his hand. The line had been drawn. Carolyn had made a powerful enemy, but she had also gained the fierce, unspoken loyalty of the undercover genius who held the company's fate in his hands. As Edward left the room, his heart pounded with a complex mix of emotions: gratitude, admiration, and a protective instinct towards Carolyn. The drama had escalated, and she was now in the line of fire because of him. He knew then that he couldn't remain a passive observer. Her act of courage had changed the stakes. Saving the company was no longer just an intellectual puzzle. It was now about protecting the one person who had shown him true worth. Carolyn sat back down, her own heart racing, but she felt no regret. She had done the right thing. She had chosen her values over her ambition. Little did she know, that single act of defiance had just set in motion a shocking chain of events that would lead to either her ruin or her ultimate triumph, with her quiet janitor friend at the very center of it all. The fragile peace bought by Carolyn's defiance was short-lived. Just hours before the scheduled launch, the worst-case scenario became a reality. The system crashed. Not just partially, but completely. The Nexus software, the billion-dollar baby of Omnicorp, was a digital corpse. The bug hadn't just corrupted data, it had triggered a catastrophic, cascading failure that brought the entire network to a screeching halt. The company was officially in freefall. Panic turned to pure terror. The launch was ruined, billions in projected revenue vanished, and the company's stock was about to plummet into the abyss. In the midst of this chaos, a jealous rival of Carolyn's, a bitter senior engineer named Marcus, saw his opportunity. He had always resented her rapid rise and her compassionate leadership style, viewing it as a weakness. Now he would use it to destroy her. Marcus, desperate to deflect blame from his own engineering team's failure, concocted a diabolical plan. He presented evidence to the enraged CEO, pointing to the anonymous code left by Janus. He framed Carolyn, suggesting she was the mastermind behind a corporate sabotage plot. He used the anonymous code as proof, arguing that it was a Trojan horse, a backdoor planted to cause the final crash, and that it must have originated from a low-level employee under her influence. He twisted her kindness into a conspiracy. She was always friendly with that janitor, Marcus whispered poisonously to Alistair Vance. Who knows what they were planning? He painted a picture of Carolyn as a disgruntled manager, using a pawn to bring the company down from the inside. It was a vicious, calculated lie, but in the atmosphere of panic and paranoia, it was a lie the CEO was desperate to believe. It gave him a clear target for his rage. This plot twist was as brilliant as it was cruel. The very clue Edward had left to help became the weapon used to frame his only ally. The act of an undercover genius trying to aid from the shadows was twisted into an act of corporate terrorism. The drama had taken a dark and personal turn, shifting from a technical crisis to a witch hunt, with Carolyn Graham as the prime suspect. The accusation was a shocking betrayal, not just from Marcus, but from the very system Carolyn had worked so hard to improve. She was being punished for her integrity, her career about to be immolated on the altar of corporate blamagaining. She had stood up for the dignity of a janitor, and now she was being accused of conspiring with him to commit the ultimate corporate sin. All eyes now turned to Carolyn, the compassionate manager suddenly recast as a saboteur. Her world was crumbling around her, her reputation in tatters, all because of a lie fueled by jealousy and fear. She had no way to defend herself against the twisted logic being presented. Her connection to Edward, once a source of quiet joy, was now being used as the noose around her neck. Fueled by Marcus's poisonous accusations and blinded by his own desperate need for a scapegoat, the CEO, Alistair Vance, became unhinged. He didn't want an investigation, he wanted a head on a platter. Enraged and desperate, he stormed out of the control room and found Edward on his usual cleaning route down the hall. In front of a horrified Carolyn, who had been summoned to witness the execution, Alistair unleashed his final furious judgment. "You," he roared, pointing a shaking finger at Edward. "You're a corporate spy. You planted that code." The accusation was insane, illogical, but Alistair was beyond reason. He fired Edward on the spot, his voice booming through the corridor. "Get out of my building. You're finished." He accused the janitor of being a corporate spy in front of a growing crowd of stunned employees, with a horrified Carolyn standing by, powerless to stop the tirade. It was the ultimate humiliation. Edward was not just fired, but branded a traitor, his name dragged through the mud for an act of sabotage he didn't commit. He was being punished for the very thing he had tried to prevent. The scene was a surreal nightmare, the real undercover genius being publicly destroyed, while the true incompetents watched from the sidelines. The drama had reached a fever pitch of injustice. Carolyn watched in disbelief, her heart shattering. The man she had defended, the man she was beginning to fall for, was being treated like a criminal. The CEO's baseless rage was a terrifying spectacle, a complete abuse of power. This public shaming was far worse than the boardroom incident, This was a character assassination, a brutal and final act of cruelty that left no room for appeal or redemption. Edward simply looked at Alistair with cold, empty eyes. Then his gaze shifted to Carolyn. He saw the horror and the flicker of doubt on her face, and that hurt more than any of the CEO's shouts. He didn't defend himself. What could he say? Admitting his secret identity now would sound like the desperate rambling of a guilty man. So he said nothing. He simply turned, left his cart, and walked out the door, his dignity the only thing he had left. This was the emotional breaking point of the entire saga. The hero was cast out, the villain was ascendant, and the only person who suspected the truth was now implicated in the crime. The act of saving the company had backfired in the most shocking way possible. The plot twist was complete. The savior had been cast out as the saboteur, leaving the kingdom to burn. As the doors closed behind Edward, a chilling silence fell over the hallway. The CEO stood panting, convinced he had rooted out the source of the problem. Carolyn was left trembling, her world completely upended. She had tried to do the right thing, and in return, she had lost her career and watched a good man be utterly destroyed. Everything was lost. Or so it seemed. With Edward gone and the accusation of sabotage hanging over her own head, Carolyn Graham's world collapsed. She was placed on immediate suspension, her access to the system revoked, her office sealed. Devastated and with her own career in ruins, she believed all was lost. The company she loved was on the brink of collapse, and she was being blamed for it. It was a crushing, overwhelming defeat. The worst part was the insidious seed of doubt that had been planted in her mind. Had she been wrong about Edward? The CEO's accusations, however insane, had been delivered with such conviction. She replayed every interaction, every conversation, searching for a clue she might have missed. Convinced she put her faith in the wrong person, she felt like the biggest fool in the world. This emotional turmoil was her own personal hell. She had stood up for him, risked her career for his dignity, and this was the result. The love story she thought was blooming now felt like a naive fantasy, an office romance that had blinded her to a darker reality. Had she been a pawn in some elaborate game of corporate espionage? The thought was a dagger to her heart. This feeling of betrayal, whether real or imagined, was the most painful part of her fall from grace. This moment is the story's false defeat. Everything the audience was rooting for has been shattered. The hero is exiled, the heroine is disgraced, and the villains are in control. It's the point where hope seems to die, a necessary darkness before the dawn. If you were in Carolyn's shoes, would you have started to doubt Edward too? Be honest in the comments. It's in these moments our faith is truly tested. Working from home, cut off from everything, Carolyn felt a profound sense of failure. She had failed the company, she had failed her team, and worst of all, she felt she had failed her own judgment. The undercover genius she had imagined was replaced by the image of a corporate spy, a man who had used her kindness to his own destructive ends. The weight of this perceived failure was suffocating. This was the ultimate plot twist for her character arc. Carolyn, the one person who could see the good in others, was now forced to question her most fundamental beliefs about people. The drama had stripped away her professional status and now attacked her very core, her intuition and her faith in humanity. She had hit rock bottom, lost in a sea of doubt and despair. But even in her darkest hour, a tiny, persistent flicker of the person she was remained. The image of Edward's face as he was being accusated wasn't the face of a guilty man. It was the face of a man who was humiliated and heartbroken. That image, that last look he gave her, was the one piece of the puzzle that didn't fit the narrative of betrayal. And it was this piece that would eventually lead her to the truth. Carolyn couldn't let it go. She refused to be a passive victim in the destruction of her own life. Though suspended, she still had a sliver of remote access to the company's security server and oversight by the IT department. Driven by a desperate need to clear her own name, she began the painstaking process of reviewing hours of security footage from the nights leading up to the crash. She was looking for proof of Marcus's lies or her own innocence. For hours, she scanned through grainy, silent footage of empty hallways and deserted offices. It was a tedious, soul-crushing task. She saw cleaning crews, security guards, and the occasional late-night engineer. But then, she found it. A clip from 3 nights ago, timed just after Edward had left his Janus clue. It was a moment so shocking, so utterly unexpected, that she had to watch it 3 times to believe her eyes. The footage showed Edward Greene, late one night, standing alone in front of a massive whiteboard in an unused conference room. In the clip, with a speed and confidence that was breathtaking, he was mapping out the entire complex software architecture of the Nexus program from memory. He wasn't cleaning, he was dissecting the code, his hands flying as he drew flowcharts and scribbled equations, proving his undeniable world-class genius. In that single silent video clip, the truth was revealed in a flash. He wasn't a spy, he was the undercover genius she had always suspected he was. The anonymous code wasn't sabotage, it was a desperate attempt to help. He had been trying to guide them, to warn them from the shadows. The realization washed over her, a tidal wave of guilt, shame, and a soaring, renewed sense of hope. Her faith in him came rushing back, stronger than ever. This was the surprise that changed everything. The proof she was looking for didn't just clear her name, it revealed the secret identity of the only man who could save them. The janitor who had been mocked and fired was in fact a legend. Her intuition hadn't been wrong, it had been catastrophically right. The plot twist wasn't that he was a villain, but that he was a hero of a magnitude she could never have imagined. All the doubt and despair she had felt vanished, replaced by a fierce, urgent sense of purpose. She had been so wrong to doubt him, even for a second. The emotional weight of her misjudgment fueled a powerful need for redemption, not just for him, but for herself. She had to find him. She had to make things right. With the security clip saved to her personal device, Silver Bullet Carolyn knew what she had to do. The game had changed. She now held the explosive truth that could expose the CEO's incompetence and Marcus's betrayal. But more importantly, she knew that Edward Greene was the only one who possessed the hidden talent required for saving the company from total collapse. The clock was ticking. Omnicorp was hemorrhaging money and credibility with every passing hour. Realizing Edward was trying to help all along, Carolyn Graham went into a frantic search for him. He was a ghost with no current address on file and a disconnected phone number. He had vanished as completely as he had appeared. Her search was a desperate race against time, with the fate of the entire company resting on her shoulders. She knew he was the only one who could prevent the company's total collapse. The engineers were still lost, the CEO was still posturing and blaming everyone but himself, and the system was still dead. Edward wasn't just their best hope, he was their only hope. The undercover genius who had been cast out was now the one person everyone, even if they didn't know it yet, desperately needed. Her search started with the mundane. She checked old employee records, cross-referenced public databases, and even visited the last known address on his file, a rundown apartment complex on the other side of town. Each dead end, each closed door amplified her panic. The drama was now a real-life thriller, with Carolyn as the lone protagonist fighting to find the exiled hero before it was too late. She thought about the man she was looking for, quiet, unassuming, deeply wounded by past betrayals and recent humiliations. Where would a man like that go? He wouldn't seek out crowds or attention. He would retreat, find a place of solitude to lick his wounds. This emotional insight into his character, born from their love story, was her best and only lead. She had to think like him, feel what he was feeling. This frantic search was Carolyn's quest for her own redemption. She was driven by a powerful need to apologize for her moment of doubt, and to prove that her faith in his true worth was real. This wasn't just about saving the company anymore. It was about saving the man who had been so profoundly wronged. Her professional mission had merged with a deeply personal one. As precious hours slipped by, a sense of hopelessness began to creep in. What if she couldn't find him in time? What if he refused to help after the way he had been treated? He had every right to turn his back on Omnicorp, to let it burn to the ground as a final act of revenge. The thought filled her with dread. The entire plot twist of his genius would mean nothing if she couldn't get him to return. Then, a memory sparked. A small comment he had made weeks ago about a favorite, quiet coffee shop with an old-school arcade machine where he went to think. It was a long shot, a desperate hunch based on a throwaway line. But it was all she had. With renewed determination, she got in her car and drove towards the last faint glimmer of hope she could find. She found him in the dimly lit corner of a worn-out coffee shop, nursing a single cup of coffee, his face etched with weariness. The confident genius from the whiteboard video was gone, replaced by the humiliated man who had been cast out. He looked up as she approached, his eyes showing a flicker of surprise followed by a wall of cautious mistrust. He had expected to never see her or anyone from Omnicorp again. Carolyn sat down, her heart pounding. There was no time for small talk. She looked him in the eyes and pleaded with him to look past the humiliation and help. "Edward, I am so sorry," she began, her voice thick with emotion. "I doubted you, just for a moment, and I will never forgive myself for that. But I know the truth now. I know who you are." She slid her tablet across the table, playing the security footage of him at the whiteboard. She appealed not to the legendary coder, but to the good man she always knew he was. "Please, don't do this for the CEO who mocked you, or for the company that threw you away," she implored. "Do it for the hundreds of good people who will lose their jobs. Do it for the integrity of the work itself. Do it for me." Her plea was raw and honest, the culmination of their entire unspoken love story. Edward watched the video of himself, a ghost from another life, and then looked at Carolyn's desperate face. He saw her sincerity, her deep regret. He had every reason to say no, to let them all suffer the consequences of their own arrogance. The thought of revenge was tempting, a sweet and simple justice. But looking at Carolyn, he saw a different path, the harder path of redemption. Her faith in him, even after her moment of doubt, was a powerful antidote to the poison of betrayal he had carried for so long. She saw his true worth when no one else did, and she was here now, asking him to be the man she always believed he was. This was a life-changing moment, a crossroads that would define his future. Would he let bitterness win, or would he rise above it? The drama of the situation was immense. The fate of a billion-dollar company was being decided in a humble coffee shop, resting on the emotional decision of a man who had been treated as less than nothing. His hidden talent was the key, but her belief in his goodness was the force that would turn it. This was the final, most important part of their office romance. After a long, heavy silence, he finally gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Okay, Carolyn," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "You'll do it, but we're going to do this my way." A wave of relief so profound it almost brought Carolyn to tears washed over her. He had chosen redemption. The undercover genius was ready to step back into the light. Edward returns to the company at the final hour, walking through the main entrance not as a janitor, but as a man on a mission. Carolyn was by his side, the two of them a silent, determined force moving through the chaos. The panicked employees and shell-shocked engineers who had once ignored him now stared in utter confusion. Why was the fired janitor back, and why was he walking with such authority? He walked past the stunned CEO, Alistair Vance, who stood speechless, his face a mask of disbelief. Alistair started to protest, to call security, but Carolyn cut him off with a single icy glare and a flash of the security footage on her tablet. The CEO's mouth snapped shut. Edward didn't even grant him a glance. He continued past the defeated engineering team, who were huddled around the main console, and approached the heart of the system. The lead engineer, Marcus the man who had framed Carolyn, tried to block his path. "You can't be in here," he sputtered. Edward looked at him for the first time, a gaze so steady and intelligent that Marcus physically recoiled. Then, without a word, Edward brushed past him and sat down at the main console, the throne of the digital kingdom he had secretly watched over. A hush fell over the room. Everyone watched, mesmerized, as his hands hovered over the keyboard. It was the shocking climax no one could have predicted. The fate of the company, the culmination of all the drama and betrayal, came down to this single moment. The undercover genius, the man they had humiliated and mocked, was now their only hope for saving the company. He didn't launch a complex diagnostic or pour through thousands of lines of code. His fingers moved with surgical precision, typing a single impossibly simple line of code into the main console. It was the one command that addressed the core logical flaw that everyone else had missed, the one key that fit the one lock. He hit enter. For a moment, nothing happened. The silence was absolute. Then, one by one, the system status lights on the main screen began to blink from red to green. Servers spun back to life with a reassuring hum. The entire system, the multi-billion-dollar Nexus project, instantly restored itself, purging the bug as if it had never existed. It was a digital miracle, a life-changing act of pure genius. The room erupted in a collective gasp of disbelief. They had spent weeks fighting a monster, and he had slain it with a single stone. Edward Greene stood up from the console, his work done. He had just performed the corporate equivalent of raising the dead, and the surprise on the faces of his former tormentors was his quiet, satisfying redemption. In the wake of the system's miraculous restoration, the truth came out with the force of an explosion. Carolyn presented the security footage to the board of directors. Edward Greene's true identity as a legendary coder, a ghost from Silicon Valley's past, was revealed. The revelation sent a shocking wave through the entire tech industry. The humble janitor was, in fact, a titan of the field, an undercover genius of the highest order. The fallout for the CEO, Alistair Vance, was catastrophic. He was left utterly humiliated, exposed not only as an incompetent leader who nearly tanked his own company, but as a petty, cruel man who had mocked and fired his own savior. The board, faced with the undeniable proof of his failure and misconduct, had no choice. He was unceremoniously fired, his legacy forever tarnished. Edward was instantly offered a fortune, a massive stake in the company, and a top position as chief technical architect. He was the hero of the hour, the man responsible for saving the company. But he didn't immediately accept. He had learned a hard lesson about the nature of power and respect. His redemption wouldn't be complete with just a title and a paycheck. He had two conditions. First, he demanded that Alistair Vance issue a formal, public apology not to him, but to every low-level employee he had ever disrespected. It was a final act of justice, a move to correct the toxic culture of the company from the top down. His second condition was far more personal. He turned away from the fawning board members and walked over to Carolyn Graham. In front of everyone, he took her hand. "None of this matters without you," he said, his voice quiet but clear. This wasn't about an office romance anymore. It was the real thing, a love story forged in fire and loyalty. He wins the heart of Carolyn, the one person who valued the man, not the title. She was the one who saw his true worth from the very beginning, and her belief in him was the only validation he truly needed. He only accepted the position after the CEO's public apology was broadcast, and Carolyn accepted his offer to start a new life together, side by side, as equals. The plot twist of their story became a legend at Omnicorp, reminder that talent can be hidden in the most unlikely of places, and that true leadership is measured in kindness, not cruelty. Their emotional, life-changing journey from drama to triumph was complete. This story is a powerful reminder that a person's true worth is never written on a name tag or defined by a uniform. It's measured in their character, their integrity, and the hidden talents they carry within them. Edward's journey shows us that true redemption isn't about revenge, it's about rising above the noise and proving your value on your own terms. If you also believe that kindness is a superpower and that everyone has a hidden genius waiting to be seen, then you've found your place. This channel is for you. Subscribe and join our community of people who look deeper and value the person, not the position. Now for the trifecta: like this video to spread the message that dignity is non-negotiable. Comment below with the most satisfying moment for you. Was it the CEO's public apology or the single line of code that saved everyone? And finally, share this story with one person who needs to be reminded that their true worth will always shine through. And while you wait for our next upload, know that our channel is a treasure chest of emotional stories just like this one. Explore our older videos and discover other unforgettable journeys of justice and redemption. To make sure you don't miss any of the incredible stories we have yet to tell, activate the notification bell. You won't want to be left out of the next emotional roller coaster.